Hi, everyone. I wrote an article the other week, and the title is something like, Why do those who've gone to boarding school stay in situations far longer than benefits them? So, these situations I'm referring to are relationships, marriages, or work, job situations. So, this is what I come across all the time with the clients that I work with and those who are on my course. And people can often feel a huge amount of shame about the fact that they can recognize how unhappy they are in a relationship, for example. It can cause huge amount of pain, emotional pain, and physical pain. Um, Health really can start to suffer, yet still they don't feel like they can walk away. I also see this with work, especially with a lot of men who may work in corporate settings, that again, the signs are there, the feelings are there, the waking up every morning full of anxiety and dread about going into work and an inability to leave. So there are more factors than the ones that I'm going to talk about. Understandably, things like finances come into it when you have to pay a mortgage, for example, with regards to changing your job. However, what I'm going to focus on is the deeper emotional impacts of growing up in a boarding school and how that can influence and prevent us from making changes that would really benefit us. So, one of the first things that I would point out is that when a child goes away to school, they learn to distrust their own feelings. They learn to disconnect from their own physical feelings, emotional feelings. So, an example is homesickness. So, you feel bereft, you are missing your home, your parents, but you are told that this is the best thing for you and you'll settle in. As long as you just get on with things and keep really busy, you're not going to feel. And therefore, you distrust those feelings. Many people receive messages such as don't upset your mother, don't upset your parents, don't talk to them on the telephone. The messages many children get from a very early age, this was what happened at my school, was that you weren't allowed any contact with your parents for the first few weeks of term, very much to break that connection and break that bond. And that is done as a necessity to enable children to attach to the school and to their peer group rather than to their parents, so that they're not there every night missing their parents. But what this creates is it creates, as adults, an inability to trust our own intuition and our own instinct. We learn to not express our needs and our wants and our desires because something happens when you're in an institution, which means that they're not going to met. And children learn from quite an early age that those needs aren't going to be met. So, what is the point in even having them? With many of the people I work with, when we start to look at what are your needs, often the response is, I don't know, and realizing that actually they've never been asked. It's never been acknowledged. They may have gone into an institution at the age of 7 and they just become one of many. That individuality isn't there. They may not have been asked whether they want cornflakes or Rice Krispies for breakfast. They are just given what they're given. So, what happens is that as an adult, we don't know how to give ourselves permission. So we're looking for someone else to tell us that it's okay to leave or to make a change. And one of the other things that happens as a result of being in a boarding school is that you are captive. I can't count the amount of times when doing all the work or the courses that I do that people make this a realization when they're speaking out loud that it's as if they're describing being in a prison, that actually they're not allowed to leave. Their freedom is curtailed. Recently, actually, on one of my courses, we were talking about how you had to sign in and out to just go out in the evening or something. And recognizing that you just didn't have that freedom to be able to do that. You always had to have permission to leave. And I think some of that gets caught up into decision making when it comes to really big decisions about making changes. As a result of the trauma that a lot of children hold in their body from going to boarding school, it can mean that they can also be really frightened of causing conflict. So terrified of those conversations, here talking about a relationship, but terrified of upsetting the other. So it's much easier to just not express and to shut down your feelings and to just put your head down and to just get on with it. And this isn't a choice. This is what I would call a fawn trauma response often, which prevents people from expressing their wants and needs. Lots of those who go to boarding school have complex PTSD, and what comes with that is a feeling that there's something wrong with me. So even though the relationship, for example, may not be okay, may be causing lots of distress, the person who is unhappy, the ex-boarder in this case, takes it on as it is their fault. Therefore, if they work harder and harder, then they'll be able to turn it around. And one of the things that are seen as a benefit of boarding school is that you build huge amounts of endurance and resilience. So it means you can stay in situations far longer than other people would who may recognize this is not okay. That disconnection from your feelings, which can cause that resilience because actually you're not feeling anything. So that means you can stay in a situation that causes you a lot of distress. Within the workplace, what I see is a similar structure. People can end up in a similar hierarchical situation to where they were at boarding school. But the belief is, well, this job has the same values that I had at school, so this must be the right place to me. I've got constant hypervigilance. I'm constantly worried that I'm going to be found out, that they carry imposter syndrome, worried that at any moment they may be attacked, or they may be fired, or they may be found out. But because this is something that people have lived with their whole lives since the age they went away to school, it's normal. They don't notice it as anything different. And what I've seen, and actually in circumstances with both, with people when relationships have ended or a job has ended, they may well have been even fired, that suddenly everything falls apart. But what happens is actually the thing that people have feared the most happening, such as a relationship ending or being fired from a job, for example, opens up this huge amount of freedom because people suddenly realize, oh, I don't have to live by those rules anymore. I am an adult. I do have freedom. I can make my own choices. It's really, really tough and really hard. So for lots of people, they chastise themselves, and the feeling can be like, why am I so weak? Why can't I do this? And I would never, ever think that about anyone in this situation, because it's not just an easy cognitive response. It's a trauma response that keeps people in situations that no longer serve them. And therefore, you have to work very slowly, firstly, to understand what some of this is, and secondly, to be able to help them to regulate their body and their nervous system, to be able to have those conversations, to recognize that actually, we're doing this, you can stay in your adult body when you're making these decisions, and recognize that you have a right. You have rights. That child at school didn't. If that child at school ran away, they were probably brought back. So the messages that are just taken on is we just have to get on with it. But you don't. You don't. There is another way. And I know it's not easy. But please don't turn on yourself and think that you're weak or that you lack courage or why do other people have to do this? Why can't I walk away? It's one of the hardest things to do. It really is. And that comes from someone who knows that. I hope this helps if any of it resonates with you. And I'll put a link to the blog post below. So have a read and let me know if it resonates. Take care.